Today's an exciting episode where we're going to have basically a roundtable with two hugely educated and knowledgeable marketing brains in the industry. So we're going to be joined here today by John Lenker and Kevin deLaplante. Boys, gentlemen, how y'all doing?
Wonderful. Thanks for having us on the show.
Good.
Thanks so much for having us, Matt.
This is new so if it feels a little bit like hard out of the gate, it's because it's the first time I've done this in a long time of having two people, but I'm stoked because we get two brains instead of one, so that's going to be super exciting. And we're going to be talking about branding and marketing, and I think that given the industry and the focus and how we're moving as an industry with wealth management, personal brand is what it's all about. How do you live your authentic self and build your authentic self and tell it in the multiple mediums that are out there to get your name out there? Because an industry that we've always been built on referrals, there's so many other opportunities to grow. And growth is continuously the same challenge that I hear from advisors. I just got back from a conference with 3,000 RIAs, and growth, it continues to be the challenge. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, I want to dive into y'all's stories. I want to learn a little bit more about John and Kevin here in a sec as well. And so I always like to say this, y'all are in marketing. John, you've co-founded this business and led this business, and I'll start with you, and then Kevin, I'll go over to you. But was this your ideal? What did you want to be as a 13-year-old John Lenker? Was this the kind of the goal right here, is to be a running of a marketing firm and making a name for yourself there? Or what did the 13-year-old John Lenker want to be?
I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. But I'll tell you, the lady on the playground when I was like in first grade, she told me, you should either be a lawyer or a salesman, because I was always talking myself out of trouble. I'd always be able to kind of, and also when the kids wanted to beat me up, which was quite frequently because I was really bad at sports and they were always mad that I was screwing up their teams, I was always able to talk myself out of getting beat up. And so I don't know. I just the human persuasion thing has always been kind of at the core of what I've been thinking about, and even the musical aspirations I had. It's about influencing people through words and music. So, in a sense, I've always been kind of on a thread from that original path, but I didn't really think about it like marketing. Someday I'm going to be promoting things. So, but that's my story.
Kevin, what about you? What did the 13-year-old Kevin deLaplante want to be on the school playground?
At 13, I would say I probably wanted to be something like an astrophysicist, a scientist, space-oriented. And I was thinking at that time, that was the beginning of the early days of the space shuttle. And so there was a lot of interest in the space program. And I kind of, at that age, I probably thought it'd be cool to be a person who ended up on Mars, like an astronaut on Mars. So that trajectory, I had certain heroes at that time who were those sort of combination science guys, explorer, adventurer types. And half of my brain was in there. And the other half was, I think, about drawing and cartooning. So it was either going to be that or like an animator for Walt Disney was the other thing I had in my head.
See, this is why I love this podcast. You always bring on people that are smarter than you. They say surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Like, I didn't even know what an astrophysicist was until right when you said it, I was like, that is way over my head. But that's such an awesome, desire that you had at that point. I'm curious how you went from being a desired astrophysicist to now being part of the marketing creative side. I mean, I guess that aligns with some of your creative doodling and drawing and creative side, but how did you find your way and navigate your way into the role you are today?
Well, I did end up studying science, actually. My undergraduate degree was actually in physics. So I did take my astrophysics class. I got to be a guy who worked the telescope for different classes at that time. But during that period, I kind of transitioned. My interests were really even more foundational in that. I kind of wanted to know like deep questions about the nature of reality, the nature of the universe. So I ended up segueing over into philosophy of science, from physics to the philosophy of science. And so the deeper things. I ended up doing a Ph.D. in philosophy. And I ended up going the academic route. I was a professional academic for 20 years. I taught at Iowa State University at Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies. Now, the question is, how did I get from there to partnering up with John Lenker at Lenker? And that was about a kind of desire to break out of just the classroom environment. I thought, I'm a big fan of big ideas. I think great ideas are our most powerful resource, really. But great ideas need champions for them to become a reality. And what I like is that in my role at Lenker, I like to think that we're in the business of championing great ideas, making them real, helping them to fulfill their promise. So I'm in this business to help great ideas find a life. And so that I get to live vicariously through the space agency clients that we have, the biomedical innovation clients that we have, these clients that are creating real value in the world. I get to learn about their world and then help them develop brand strategy and messaging. So for me, it's another version of an educational experience that I would never have gotten if I had stayed inside the classroom.
I love
that. But an
that.
important detail that he left out was that he was a top-rated podcaster. He had a podcast called The Critical Thinker, and I was a fan, and I started supporting his Patreon back in the day. And then when we eventually got a really interesting client, which you named that client earlier in the conversation, one of the big pieces of strategic advice that we gave them was to start a podcast. And so we brought Kevin in as sort of a specialist to help, facilitate that. Ended up being a massively successful podcast. But then one thing led to another, and we kept bringing Kevin in for different things. And, a few years later, ended up asking him to come and join us as a full-time partner. And he's one of the 4 partners at Lenker. And to this day, one of the, not just one of the people I admire most, but I would say that almost everybody in our company, there's something like 16 or 20 of us at this stage. Kevin is one of everybody's most admired person. So
I can see why.
Real fortunate to have him here.
And I think it's cool. I think it's just an awesome story about how the merging of academia and professional world and how you can marry the two and the benefits of both of them, because sometimes they get segregated or siloed out of this is academia and this is professional life. And I think that there's a opportunity, and this is a testament to that, of the convergence of the two. And I think that there's so much power there of the two of them, and you're seeing it inside of your everyday, John, on your team side, and Kevin, your team side. And so, John, I'm curious on your story, right? I love this part of the conversation because this allows us to develop a relationship with our guests and our listeners, to develop a relationship with them. And I'm curious how you went from the playground to being a salesman and a lawyer, which you still doing sales probably, I'm sure. And so you're still in that, but how did you go from that avenue to then starting the firm and kind of helping out on the marketing side with your organization?
Well, it was a long odyssey. I ended up learning quite a bit about communications philosophy and strategy. I ended up taking a job which was sort of pivotal in my career with one of the founders of Interactive Multimedia. And he had an e-learning company. And so his entire focus was on helping adult learners become motivated to learn and to actually absorb, information of various kinds, and then to be able to, deploy that into their work life and make changes. And we ended up working on some of the biggest e-learning projects on earth, meaning, millions and millions of students. And it ended up being quite influential. I got this idea though. When I was with him, I was with that company for about 3 years, and I realized that in the world of marketing, which I'd had a life before that role in kind of the world of marketing. And I realized that marketers aren't really good at understanding how people learn. And if marketers knew a little bit about how to properly educate people about the value proposition of what they're offering, that maybe they would be more efficient and more effective in the process of, gaining market share. And so that was kind of the idea that led me to go into the advertising industry for a while. I went and worked for one of the major advertising agencies in the digital arena, and applied a lot of that knowledge and did some really interesting stuff. Again, some really big projects for some massively big companies. And at that time, I decided to write a book about all this, and I ended up getting a book deal with a company called New Writers Publishing, and they published, I think it was the world's first online communications philosophy textbook way back in 2002. And from there, I started my own interactive agency and started to try to live out those principles of creating really compelling experiences for people in a market, so that the people in an audience would kind of take hold of a central idea and be real interested in pursuing that into a relationship with a company. And so that was kind of the theme is do a better job of helping businesses tell their story in a way that makes people fall in love with them and believe in them and want to go forward with them. And, to do that effectively, it's all, this word authentic has become sort of cheap nowadays, and people could just sort of put we're trying to, authenticity is one of our most important values. But I mean, everybody says that. But, genuine authenticity is something that you actually have to do almost like an archaeologist. You have to kind of dig into your history. You have to go through the layers of what made you become who you are, and sort of discover the things that are real and unique and solid, the things that you want to kind of sort of boil down. Like if you're, mining for gold or silver or something, you want to get the little particles, and you want to sift out the bad stuff, and you want to put heat and pressure on it and refine it and purify it into something really outstanding and amazing. And I really set about wanting to do that for clients. And, lo and behold, it's super hard to do that because there's so many different kinds of disciplines that come into it. And sort of fast forwarding to today, I got smart about 4 or 5 years ago and said, Kevin was the first one. That's closer to 6 years ago. I said, we need to get a couple of really smart people in here who are masters of their domain, and we can kind of come together and have a really solid team of leaders to help these businesses that we're trying to help in all aspects. And so that's how we ended up with 4 partners at Lenker. And I'm really excited about the journey I've been on, but I'm also excited about, I think, the topic we're eventually going to get to today, which is how do you develop a personal brand? How do you make yourself stand out in a crowd, in a competitive field? If you're a financial advisor, or really any kind of person in professional services. If you look at me, I took a career with my own name and turned it into a marketing firm, which, has several partners and, a bunch of employees. Well, how did that happen? And, Kevin, he developed a reputation as somebody really reliable, who understood critical thinking, who understood principles of argumentation and persuasion, and built a massive international following. And how do you kind of start with these aspirations and these ideas and make decisions that kind of lead you forward in a career that bring it into this kind of focus where you can have impact on businesses all over the world? That's kind of our story. And hopefully we'll get into some of the things that will help some of the people in your audience understand, some of the steps and what are the recipes that go into leading to that kind of outcome.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get into that aspect of it, the personal branding side. I want to do one question before we do, because I think that this is a really important lesson for advisors. And John, you recently posted on LinkedIn of a past podcast that you were on, and you had talked about this concept of you lost focus in your business at one point during your journey, and it really kind of, you felt, at least you said, you felt like it set you back to some extent, and it took you time to recover that. I want to dive into that because I think that I think it sets the stage for marketing and authenticity, to where we have to ensure that we remain focused on who we are and stay focused on what we are doing and what who we are serving and how we are doing that. Or we could find ourselves sprawling, especially in marketing, something that people don't know about. But I think people can relate to your story as business owners or leaders, in terms of how you had a challenging time. Can you just explain a little bit more of that as we set the foundation to head into authenticity and personal branding?
Sure. I've actually never said what I'm about to say in a podcast before, but Kevin will laugh because he and I worked on this together. One of the things that we do is we do pro bono work for a youth development organization in the Twin Cities that helps at-risk youth advance and elevate their lives. And the founder of that organization is a world famous athlete. And anyway, he's had a massive impact on so many kids. And I was just kind of studying the formula that he used to have such an impact one day. And I said, his name's Tony. I said, you really should write a book. And I know what the name of this book should be. And the name of the book kind of is the answer to your question that you just asked me. The name of the book is Do, Be, Have. Do, Be, Have. It's a book that hasn't been written yet, but it's the idea that we have for this book. And really what it is it's to teach kids that if you want to have all this stuff, you're so focused on wanting to have all these things. I want these great tennis shoes, or I want to have this really cool car. I want to have this, really, whatever, fame and fortune and all these things. That's what you want to have. But what do you have to be in order to be the kind of person that has those things? And then what do you have to do to become the person that you have to be to have those things? And really it starts with doing. And like any athlete who has to get up every morning and practice and rehearse and strengthen and get dexterity and get really smart about how to be in the game, you have to start with those fundamentals. And I think what happened to me back in the early 2000s, I started to experience a lot of success in my business, the book and traveling all over the place and getting these really great projects and getting international press. And I started to become so consumed with the things that I wanted to have as a result of success. I became so focused on the stuff that I wanted out of all of these efforts that I forgot about the efforts that it takes to get to the having part. And I spent so much time focused on all the, entertaining people and having all these big events. And, that I lost sight of the practicing and the drills and the thinking and the blocking and tackling and all those things that just need to happen day in and day out. I lost sight of that. And I took my eye off the ball. And as a result, I could have been way further ahead. And I might even have jeopardized my ability to ever come to a place of having the influence and impact that I had set out to have. So, I kind of had to take several steps back, learn some really hard lessons. And, especially with people who knew me the best, my personal brand reputation took a hit. Because now my brand became, John's the guy who is taking his eye off the ball. That's what happened. I went from the guy John's the guy who's got all these innovative ideas and writing about these great things and leading us into the future, to John's the guy who took his eye off the ball. And I'm not sure if I can trust that. So it took a long time to figure that out, learn, even understand the lesson I was supposed to be learning, get back on track and pay the dues again to get to the place where people were willing to follow again. So it's kind of a personal answer to that question, but it's sort of the truth. That's what happened.
Well, I appreciate the vulnerability on that and opening up. I think that's I think it's a powerful message that, when we reach different levels of success, some people keep going on, some people soak up and think that they can stop and slow down. And what I'm hearing from you is that you can't ever really stop and slow down because, as Warren Buffett always says, it takes you a lifetime to build a brand, a second to lose it. Right. And, it's such an important value prop. But I think that this is a great segue over to branding, right? Because I love that title, Do Be Have. And so whenever you write that book, I want a copy of it, or I'll pay for a copy of it to help with that, whatever it needs to be. But I think that that's an amazing concept, because in order to have a personal brand, right, you must, there's a lot that has to be done. Like, it's not just, you can just go do one thing. There is no silver bullet, and you must be yourself. You have to be authentic. And if you try to be someone else, it's going to fade. And so I'm curious from y'all's standpoint, whoever wants to take the question, like, what is the biggest challenge in building a brand that people just they don't see it. It's a misperception of building brands from y'all's perspective, because you help so many companies and individuals build those brands.
I'll try to take that, although I think the answer is different depending if you're talking about personal branding versus, startup branding versus enterprise level branding, right? The first thing is understanding what a brand is, right? And there's this confusion that people have. They associate brand identities with things like your name and your logo and your website, how the brand shows up in the market. But that's really not what brand is about, or at least it's a manifestation of brand. So brand identity is really about, I think of it in terms of these three different the three R's: reach, reputation, and relationship. So your brand is reach is, how famous are you? How many people inside and outside of your target market know your name, recognize your logo, have any understanding of what you do? So you can be, your brand can be, like, in that sense, your reach. But of course, that's not the whole story. Another one is brand as reputation. What are you known for? So there we're more interested in, like, the content of people's understanding of what do people think about and feel about you when they think about you? What association spontaneously comes to mind? Your reputation. And then the third one, brand as relationship, is maybe arguably the most important one from a business standpoint. It's because here we're interested in contexts where your product or your service shows up and it makes a difference in a customer's life. So when you think about the journeys of individual people, the story of their lives, what role does your brand play in their story? When and where and how do you show up for them? So you think about, are you famous? Yes or no? Do you have a good reputation? Yes or no? And am I a meaningful presence in their life? Yes or no? And when you can say yes to all those, you have the makings of a very strong, influential brand. And they're distinct, though. And so the question about how you build those, how you build reach, how you build your reputation, how you build the relationship, those are all different. And that's where the expertise of brand development comes in. And many businesses want to have those outcomes, but don't really have a good idea of a methodology for building that intentionally. Because if you just leave it on your own, you're going to have some brand identity. Some people are going to know something about you. You'll have some reputation. You can do nothing intentionally, and you'll develop a brand. It may not be the brand that's working for you, right? The goal of intentionally crafting that kind of influence over time, that's a real art form. It's a science and it's an art, and it's the kind of thing that is underappreciated, both in terms of what it can do for you when it's working well, but also in the skills and time it takes to develop it.
I think that that's an interesting kind of segue to go into. I would love to dive into each of those specifically, because I think that some people view it's like, especially in the digital world that we're in, it's right. Oh, I got all these impressions, or I don't have impressions, so I don't have reach, and I don't know, I don't have, a reputation. I think my reputation is this, but how do I know that my reputation is there? So I wanted to go maybe one by one, like for brand reach, for instance, right? Building a strategy, or thinking about someone that wants to build a strategy around that pillar of a 3-pillar. You take them all. How does that strategy form? And then I'm curious on like how it transitions, because this is such like a personal business, because people buy you as a relationship, and so how do you kind of make sure that you segment that out and see the difference as you move into kind of the relationship aspect of what your company is doing for you, but then actually you're a part of that as well. So maybe we start with reach and go down that avenue. But John, I know you had something here as well.
Well, just to kind of anchor it in the minds of the people listening, I want to put a little bit of an umbrella over that. Think of it like Kevin just gave you the three legs of a three-legged stool, and I'm going to give you the seat. And really, if you want to boil down what a brand is as an umbrella, because those are kind of the pillars that Kevin just gave you. Really, it's what people believe about you. And specifically, it's what people believe about your value proposition. And most people these days have heard that term value proposition. And what does that really mean? You as a professional services provider, as a financial advisor, you believe and you're telling a story that you offer value to your potential clients, right? And you're proposing that they enlist you in the work of helping their situation somehow. So what your brand is what people believe about the strength of that value proposition when it comes to you. It's the space that you occupy in people's minds. What is the current status of your reach? What is the current status of your reputation? What is the current status of the quality of the relationships that you have? It's the index in people's minds when they think of you. What is it that they believe about you? And so if you're listening to this and you're wanting to know how to really bring your business forward in a meaningful way, you have to start focusing on this idea that you're out there putting yourself out there, and people form an impression in their mind, and they remember something about you or not. And what is it that they're going to remember? So as you're out there trying to increase your reach, you've got to, another R, relevance. It's like, why should I care? Why should I see this ad, or you're showing up on my stream. Why should I care? Because you can reach them, but then you've got to show the relevance. You've got to show something that people grab onto that compels them to want to go forward, to learn about your reputation and to try to build that relationship. So I just kind of want to, put that little dome over this conversation that all of these things kind of feed up into an impression in people's minds, what they believe about your value proposition, and that is what your brand ultimately is.
And I think that provides a really good layer on top of the question where I was going with that, is because I think that there's a challenge, especially in our industry in wealth management, that there's so much noise, and there's also stereotypes and prior set beliefs already in people's heads about the industry that you have to overcome, which makes it hard to build the true personal brand that creates that relationship from a marketing standpoint. That's why the business has always grown from relationships, but firms need to start finding ways to add more legs to the stool, and their marketing and providing your own brand is so key. But I think that there's been a challenge in our space to overcome and shine through the noise. And so that's what I'm curious of digging into from a reach, reputation, relevance, relationship side of how people can think about creating strategy to be seen in such a noisy market that already has someone's view in their head already at times.
Well, if you're thinking strategically, you're talking about a strategic brand, right? It's not just a brand, it's a strategic brand. So your goal is to develop a brand identity that supports your business goals, that supports your business strategy. So you want to become known for something. You have growth goals, you have market goals, you have profit goals, you have revenue, sales goals. What is the kind of brand identity that's going to be a tailwind that helps all of those happen? And that is what strategic brand development is all about. It starts with being very precise about the value proposition that you are offering the market. So now we have these standard marketing questions of who is your audience? What is their need? What can you do to help them fulfill a need that's not being met already. So all those basic marketing strategy concepts of finding what's the competitive environment, who are the target, can they afford the service you offer, how big is it? You do all that stuff. Your market opportunity analysis is part of brand development. So you've got, let's say you clear that your market opportunity is this. There's a quadrant that's open. It's an open field here, say. Space to move into. That's what the first part, in order to rise above the noise, is maybe find some place where it's quieter, right? If you're trying to compete with all the other noisy businesses, you really have to differentiate yourself strongly in order to stand out. So these basic questions about differentiation, what makes you unique, are crucial. Get that clear crucially. And if you don't have that clear, all the branding in the world is not going to help you, right? Get that part clear. Once that's dialed in, and you're very clear about where your uniqueness lies, where your audience lies, then there's all kinds of tools for crafting, for analyzing the audience, figuring out what is the messaging that they will resonate with. And then you position yourself where they show up in the world. The key thing is, like, if they only visit certain sites, if they're only, this is where they hang out. You need to meet them there, where they hang out, with a message that's relevant to them. How do you decide that? That's analysis, that's research, that's customer interviews, all the process you do in developing a strong marketing plan to begin with. And then you're bringing the brand development issue into bear on help to support those basic marketing and business development goals. John, you want to jump in and talk about like tactics that show up here, or principles?
There's I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but I'm thinking of like pickup basketball or something. It's like, a bunch of people show up, over lunch, whatever, they're going to play some pickup basketball. And you're there, with maybe people you've seen or played with before, maybe some strangers, but pretty quickly you kind of see who's got the moves and who's got the skill, who's, got the background that makes them undeniably the best one, right? In that game. And you admire the people who've got those skills. And I think, all the stuff we can say about branding really doesn't mean a whole lot if at the end of the day, what you show up with isn't undeniable. When people see you perform, when they listen to you speak, the insights that you're able to bring to the table. If the insights you're able to bring to the table seem average and mediocre and things that you could just find anywhere without being an expert, why would I want to work with you? Other than I just like you and I want to give you my business, right? What is it that you bring to the table? What insights do you have? One of the problems in my brand was that I had a lot of big ideas. I saw the vision of all these bases that needed to be covered. And I could kind of learn enough about each one that I could talk about it at a certain level. But at a certain level, my background knowledge just fell short. I didn't have the background that I really needed to go deep, 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 deep to have the insights, right? So when I met Kevin, one of the reasons I admired him so much was because he had spent his life developing the background knowledge that helped him operate within these areas that I was so interested in, with skill and precision that I just would, in a million years, I'm never going to have. So in that case, I wasn't able to do the things that I needed to do to be who I needed to be, to have the kind of impact that I wanted to have. So in that case, I said, I need to team up with somebody who's done those things, who's become the kind of person that has that background knowledge and those insights so that we can have the impact that we want to have. So sometimes it means teaming up. But I think that, in really practical terms, if you want to have that reach and show relevance once you get there and have the my mind's trying to blank, the reputation and build the relationships, you got to show up with something that's kind of like awesome. When people are talking to you and it's like, wow, you just clearly have more at your disposal. You're able to draw up from within yourself things about guiding my financial life that I don't see that happen when I talk to other people. There's something unique about you. Now you become the person who has that special, insight. And I think that probably is fundamental to people in your audience is, when you are selling professional services and when you're trying to position yourself to guide other people's financial futures, there needs to be something demonstrative about you interacting with you that makes it super clear that you have insights other people don't have. So you have to do the work. You have to do the work that makes you become the person with those insights so that you can have the market share that you want, if that makes sense.
It's kind of, what I'm hearing is, Kevin, to your point is, and John as well, is that, it's really about, when we talk about it a lot here on Bridging the Gap, of finding a niche and just going really deep into that and serving that person, right? Being the generalist is a little bit more tough, or is a little bit tougher, right? And, too often we try to build a marketing strategy inside of our industry and leverage, the same content, talking about Roth conversions or IRA contributions or whatever it may be. And that's not showing your differentiated self. Now, if you can show it in a unique and creative way that displays your authenticity, which is who you really are, then you're going to be able to attract people that are attracted to that, but you're not going to be able to attract everybody, and that should be okay. I think that, too often we just get into this like cookie cutter model of marketing, which actually in my mind creates a ton of opportunity from that standpoint. And, now that it's so easy for clients to go and research and find different content pieces so easily, whether they even use ChatGPT or Google or whatever it is, they can find things really quickly and discern whether you're authentic and different, or if you're just one of the same, just with the same type of voice, just different words. And so I'm curious from y'all's standpoint, identifying a niche, going deep in that niche, focusing on really kind of owning that and being creative and different, not just for different sake, but different with a unique perspective on that. Where does the future of marketing then go? And I know, John, you have experiences in immersive experiences and everything of that nature on marketing inside, but like where is the future going beyond just, blogs and videos and advertisements?
2 words: persuasive education. Persuasive education is, it's not blogs, it's not videos. Those are the formats for influence, right? Showing up speaking at conferences or at small little gatherings in your town. It's really creating a depth of understanding within yourself that when you are on the stage, when the spotlight is on you and you are speaking, that you are drawing from something that clearly goes deeper than what other people are drawing from. And the interesting thing about this particular arena is that to a certain degree, you can control a little bit about how well you perform in that situation by deciding to do the work to get a deeper set of insights than other people have. And this is really one of the lost arts, I really believe, is that, there's different kinds of learning. Okay. There's technical words. One is accretion. It means accruing or gathering. It's like interest accruing. So accretion, you're pulling new stuff into your head. Okay. And the next one is called tuning, and it's where you're practicing. It's like you're doing your scales or, doing a repetitive behavior over, like the psychomotor stuff, but thinking. So you're gathering and you're kind of rehearsing, memorizing. But the third one, restructuring, is one that we don't give much time for anymore because we're all consumers of information. We're scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. We're drinking in other people's stuff. We're not taking the time to say, okay, I'm going to put a pause on all the inputs. I've been gathering, I've been taking notes. I've got all this stuff in front of me. I'm going to kind of unpack it. And I'm going to spend the next 2 hours with a pencil and a paper and doodling and kind of reflecting on all of this information and trying to see if there's something there that is an insight that jumps out, almost like lightning striking. That lightning strike, like, oh my gosh, look at that. There's some kind of pattern that nobody else is seeing because they haven't taken the time. And it's not like you've got to reinvent, you don't have to be Einstein out there with the insights. Maybe you just need to be one beat ahead of the next person, right? Maybe it's a day or 3 days or a week or a month ahead because you've taken the time to see the patterns that have developed and see kind of where things are about to unfold. And you're the one who can give everybody that 1 week head start, right? And it's like, but it's just like the do be have thing. You got to take the time to do the work to become the person that has the insight. And if you don't take that time to sit and reflect, whatever that may mean for you, it's never going to happen for you. You're going to be in the middle of the pack the rest of your life. And I'll tell you one other insight, which, this is, people have been saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Intellectually, financially, all those things. Get with a group, get with some people call them masterminds. Get with really smart people. They don't necessarily have to be in your field, but people who are digging deep in their areas of expertise and they want to interact with and talk about ideas. And restructuring sometimes can be a group activity. Actually, when we do branding initiatives for major companies, there's a lot of that we kind of help facilitate and orchestrate. But doing that work, creating a space for really thinking through what are the insights that are emerging out of the data. What are the patterns I see? What do I really believe is going to happen next? And who are the people I can talk about this with that are going to make me smarter and sharper so that I would say in this field that makes me one beat ahead, that I show up with, that advice to buy a day before everybody else does, right? Or how to pivot or react because I have so finely tuned my expertise. And everybody knows it who talks to me. They can see that, right? Become that person. And then that's going to be your brand. You're the person who just has that quick insight, who guides me in a way nobody else can. That is how you build a brand.
Yeah. I I have so many questions that come off of that, but I need to be respectful of y'all's time and everybody else's time. But I think that from my perspective, how I hear that and I take that in is the depth of knowledge is key. And just like everything that we do in our lives, we get deep in it early on, and then we take it for granted for what we know. We don't try to go and get deeper on new things, and we just take surface level to build on that. And I think what I'm hearing is that the ability of going deep faster with something very specific and taking that time to think, right, which we don't take time to do anymore, is to think, will then create the brand. In order to create a personal brand, not only do you have to be yourself, but you have to be thoughtful and you have to do the work. And there's more work than just putting out a blog post and finding that creative way of sharing or teaching something new is extremely key. So if you can do that, I think that's super key. John and Kevin, this has been super interesting, and I really appreciate the insight. And I appreciate y'all tag teaming this together because I think there was a huge value in that. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you both the two quick kind of lightning round questions here, because I always like to learn from people that are smarter than me, like yourselves. And I like to read books. And John, to your point, one of the takeaways I'm having is like, I'm going to take each book I read and spend hours kind of taking time to think about it after reading, as opposed to just going on to the next one, which is so good. So what's one book out there that you think everybody should read if they haven't, or reread if they have? Kevin, I'll start with you, and then John, I'll head over to you.
Sure. Well, if we're talking about personal branding for service in professional services, it's different. I was going to recommend a book for business orientation called The Brand Driven CEO. Which is a good book. And it really is about the value of brand for company growth. and the claim that the CEO is the one who's primarily responsible for promoting the brand identity. It's cool. But from a personal branding stance, I was attracted to this concept of a visible expert. And it combines the idea that someone who does professional services, you are selling yourself as an expert in some field, consulting, legal, finance. But you can be an expert and no one knows you. You're invisible, right? And companies need to have at least a few visible experts, the ones who are out there, getting their name known, presenting themselves to the market in front of audiences, developing the reputation as experts. If it's personal brand, it's crucial. But even if it's a group, it's a firm, one or two people who are going to assume the role of the visible expert, it's a crucial role to play, because you're doing the work of drawing attention to the whole firm. You're bringing people in. You're doing all kinds of relationship management. And there's a good book out called The Visible Expert Revolution: How to Turn Ordinary Experts into Thought Leaders, Rainmakers, and Industry Superstars. And it's a book written by a team of people who have a marketing firm that specializes in professional services marketing. That is marketing, branding for individuals who are in the professional services game. Recommend it highly.
I love that. I love that. John, what about you?
Well, I wasn't going to say this until after this conversation, and now I'm going to recommend one of the books that had the biggest impact on my career. It's an older book. That's called Spin Selling by a guy named Neil Rackham. That's Rackham. And really, it's what taught me about consultative selling. Really digging into the situation and needs of an individual that you're trying to sell to, instead of just trying to, throw whatever it is you want to throw onto them for your own gain. It's really about, how do you solve the business problem they're having? And to do that, you have to learn about it. You have to understand the problems. You have to understand the implications of solving those problems, because that establishes the value, right? The value of your solution. And then learning how to present yourself in a way that isn't just self-serving as a person selling services, but as someone who is there to solve your business problem. So Spin Selling by Neil Rackham.
I love that. I love that. And then I'll close with this. John, I'll start with you. We talked about a ton here. If there's one actionable idea that you think our listeners should take from this podcast, what's that one actionable thing that they can take and implement today or tomorrow and have an impact on their future from a brand, marketing, et cetera side?
Just what I said before, every week, take all the inputs, all the things that you're gathering, and set aside time to see how all of those new pieces of information tie in to your body of knowledge that you already have, and to make those connections so that you stay on the leading edge of having insight. So that's it. Take the time to do the homework, to make yourself demonstrably smarter and more insightful than the people you're competing against every week.
I love that. Kevin, what about from you?
I'm going to say the same thing, but slightly differently. I think about personal brand. In fact, most branding issues in terms of at least two dimensions. One is like the corporate brand or the personal brand question, which is, do I like this person or not? Do I like this company or not? How do I feel about them? Nice guy. If I take Steve at your business. What do you think of Steve? Oh, he's great, friendly, charming. I love tells great stories. He's a great. That's a different question from asking, do you think Steve is good at his job? Like, what do you think about Steve's performance in the work he's paid to do? He says, well, he's not the strongest in our company, but he's, all of a sudden it changes, right? Think about your personal brand in terms of that first sense of like, do people like you? Are you authentic? Do you connect with them? And so forth. And then you're like your service brand, namely the reputation you have for the quality of the service you're offering, either the product or your service. And I think that you can imagine yourself evolving over time where the personal brand grows, but your service brand doesn't. That is, it's not getting any better. You're sort of stuck in a rut, say, for example, but people like you. But at a certain point, the reputation for your work will suffer unless you are committed to leveling up, committed to improving, changing, meeting your audience's needs better, revising and refining and elevating your value proposition. So I like the idea of alignment between your personal brand and your service brand. You have to be committed to improving all the time. In that sense, you kind of want to have them both be high, right? But if you had to choose in business, your service brand, you could be a bit of like a rascal or a bit of like a curmudgeon or other things that you might not rub everyone the right way. But if your reputation for quality service and your product is really high, you will sell. The other way around, what you have is illusion, right? Your personal brand there's nothing behind it, and yet will be unmasked. Mm-hmm. And in this day and age, you will erode your reputation. You will only go so far. So you have to be committed to the excellence of your service or product. Mm-hmm. And part of your brand identity has to be that commitment. I'm always looking to improve, always looking to help my audience, because the audience is going to change and evolve over time. The market will evolve. You have to evolve with it. And your authenticity is going to be strongest. You can have the most impact when people see you as committed to their ongoing role. You have that role in their life. So it's the commitment to your service brand is the thing that I think is going to serve you best in the long run.
I love that. That's good. The illusion aspect is so key. I think there's so many people out there that have that aspect of it. So, guys, this has been a real pleasure. I really appreciate y'all taking the precious commodity of time out of your day to spend it here with us on Bridging the Gap. And John, I'll position this question to you. What's the best way for the listeners who are definitely going to be interested to continue to follow you, get in touch with you, and be inspired by you? What's the best way for them to stay in touch with you all?
Lenker.com/bridgingthegap.
There it is. John and Kevin, thank you so much. Y'all stay well and be well. Appreciate y'all joining us here.
Take care. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure.